So before we dig too deep into the finishing touches, there's a bigger question that you want to settle. How do you know when the video is done? Because there's almost always more that you can do to a piece if you give it time. That Dean video from back in some of the earliest of these lessons, it was published years ago, and I still see things that I would change if I were to publish it today. But chasing perfection it's like chasing the horizon. The videos, they're never really done. I love this line from Lorne Michaels, the producer of Saturday Night Live. He says, "We don't put on a show because it's ready. We put on a show because it's 11:30 on Saturday night and we have a contract to put on a show." and the same with your videos. There's a point where you just have to say, done, and know that it's finished. And then you're ready for the finishing touches. So in the next few lessons, we're going to look at the things that you can do to finish up your video, to make it look and to sound its best. As always, you may be using different software from me, and that's okay. Most programs have some way of doing what we're going to describe. I'll be showing you the tools in Final Cut Pro, but I'll talk about them in ways that you can use in about any program. I've said it before that audio is really a key component of your video, maybe even more important than the picture. So today, we'll be looking at finishing the audio mix. We talked about using audio compression in the last video about music, and that's one of the first things that I do to mix the sound. I put some compression on everything, a little on the interviews and lightly on the music. That way I can get all the levels a bit more consistent, and the computer does it for me. Now, some people, they might end up watching your videos in a quiet office with good speakers, and some are going to watch it in a cell phone, in a busy restaurant where there's lots of distractions. And you want to make sure that your video sounds good everywhere. And consistent volume is important for that. After adding the compression, I then start to look at the levels individually. Now, honestly, I usually do this a lot earlier than now. I'll set the audio levels where I want them a lot of times before I even start editing, but I didn't want to overwhelm you with that when we're starting just talking about editing, so we're talking about it now. Generally, you want the audio meter to bounce around -6 to -12. Most editing software, they should have an audio meter, and that just tells you how loud things are. You may have to add it to your screen, though. It's usually somewhere in the View menu. In my program, it's actually under Window. Now, not every bit of audio has to hit exactly between -6 and -12. Don't go adjusting it every second of audio to make sure that everything is there, but most of it should bounce around those levels. The idea is that, again, your audio is basically consistent, and no one needs to be turning the volume up or down to hear parts of your video, especially if your video gets played not just on social media, but maybe in a large room, like at a meeting. Consistent audio helps a lot to make sure that everyone can hear and understand your project. So now the other thing that I'm looking for is to make sure that the audio, it never goes above 0. That's louder than the system can handle, and the audio may start to clip or overmodulate when it's that loud. So make sure, keep it under 0. To do all that, first I'll go through the interviews, and I'll just make sure they're all at good levels and they sound consistent throughout, especially that no one interview is noticeably louder or quieter than the other interviews. Then I'll match the music to the dialogue. You want to hear the music, but make sure it doesn't obscure the interviews. I find that when my interviews are at a good level, kind of bouncing between, again, that -6 and -12, and my music, if it's slightly compressed, then I start the music volume at around -16, and that tends to just work. I'll make adjustments based on the recording, of course, but that's usually a good starting point. Again, make sure that you're really listening to the dialogue, and that you're not just hearing it in your head because you've watched it so many times. So, it tends to be easy to put the music too loud because, again, you don't really have to hear the detail in the interview because you know it so well. But also be careful about the opposite side, that the music is so quiet that you can't really hear it. You might want to just test your project out on different speakers to make sure that it sounds good everywhere. Higher quality speakers will usually get you a good balance that you can trust are going to play pretty well about anywhere, but different TVs, different cell phones, just different devices, they'll play differently. And until you get some experience playing back your audio on different systems, that's a great way to learn about crafting your mix. Once I've got everything at rough levels that I like, I'll go back in and look for details, just making sure nothing's too loud or soft that the compression didn't fix, and I'll go in and make small adjustments there. Sometimes someone may have gotten quiet for a few words for whatever reason, and then I need to make sure that the audience can hear them, so I'll boost those. Or sometimes certain syllables, they might get too loud, especially T's, S's, K's, things like that. So I want to pull them back so that they don't just kind of shock the audience from being so loud. I might also listen for any little swallows, lip smacks, or other things that are less than wonderful in the mix, and see if I can't bring the volume down on those to make the interview sound as pristine as I can. And finally, I'll do a pass listening for any awkward edits or any clicks on the audio edits. Sometimes editing from one part of the interview to another, I'll miss little details, maybe a little part of a word, so I'll go in and clean those up. Sometimes there could be a noticeable click at the beginning or the end of a clip, right on the edit point. It may not even be there when you play the clip by itself, but when you edit it with another clip, it can make a click. And there's a technical reason for this, which it's kind of complicated, but basically know that sometimes making an edit, it can add a click to the audio. Fortunately, the solution is super simple. Add a very tiny audio fade out on the outgoing edit, and then a fade in on the incoming edit. The fades, they can be less than a single frame. They just need to be there to soften that transition so that it doesn't make a click. This is another thing that I often do earlier while I'm editing, not necessarily at this point, but again, I didn't want to overwhelm you. So now, I just told you to watch the video all the way through, probably 7 or 8 times, looking for different things each time. Once you've done this on a few videos, you can look for all those things at the same time and probably just watch it once or twice and make adjustments as you go. But as you're learning, watching it multiple times is probably a good idea, so you can stay focused on the things that you want to fix. And once you've got a good audio mix, you're ready to move on to fine-tuning the images, and that's our next lesson.